The hammer strikes the anvil with a thunderous clang, sending sparks dancing through the smoky air like fireflies. Deep in the heart of a celestial forge, calloused hands work molten metal that glows brighter than the sun, shaping destiny itself into the form of a legendary blade. This is no ordinary blacksmith, this is a divine craftsman, weaving magic and metal into weapons that shake the heavens. Across every culture, from the volcanoes of Rome to the frozen halls of Asgard, these supernatural smiths have shaped myths as skillfully as they shaped steel. Their hammers forged more than weapons, they forged the very fabric of legends. Today we shatter 25 stubborn myths about these master craftsmen of mythology, from the misunderstood power of Hephaestus' limp to the shocking truth about Wayland and the smith's prison workshop. You'll discover why volcanic eruptions were thought to be Vulcan's angry hammer strokes, how a disabled god became Olympus' most ingenious inventor, and why divine forges were never as simple as fire and anvil. Some of these myths are half-truths, some are outright lies, and some will change how you see mythology forever. So grab your tongs and quenching bucket, we're diving deep into the glowing heart of myth to separate fact from folklore, one red-hot revelation at a time. Now let's turn our attention to the first myth on our list, one that flips the script on what it means to be powerful. Hephaestus, the Greek god of fire and metalworking, is often remembered for two things: his unmatched skill as a craftsman and his physical imperfections. Many assume his lameness made him weaker, an outcast among the perfect Olympians. But here's the truth: his so-called weaknesses were the very foundation of his genius. When Hephaestus was born with a limp, his own mother, Hera, cast him from Mount Olympus, ashamed of his appearance. He fell for an entire day before landing in the sea, where Thetis and Eurynome raised him in an underwater cave. Far from the glittering halls of the gods, he didn't wallow in despair, he built. Alone in the dark, he honed his craft with nothing but determination and raw talent. By the time the other gods realized their mistake and brought him back, he had already forged wonders they couldn't replicate. His lameness didn't slow him down, it sharpened his mind. Unable to rely on physical strength, Hephaestus became a master of innovation. He crafted golden automaton servants to assist him, machines that moved with divine precision. These weren't just helpers, they were extensions of his brilliance, proof that creativity could compensate for any limitation. Then there's Pandora, the first mortal woman, molded from clay and gifted with traits from every god. She wasn't just a creation, she was a masterpiece, designed with such complexity that she became a force of destiny herself. Even his exile became his advantage. Away from the distractions of Olympus, he worked in solitude, turning isolation into inspiration. When Hera needed a throne, he crafted one so cunningly intricate it trapped her the moment she sat down. It wasn't just revenge, it was a statement. His greatest weapons weren't brute force but ingenuity, patience, and an unbreakable will. So the next time someone claims disabilities diminish potential, remember Hephaestus. His forge wasn't just a workshop, it was a testament to the power of turning adversity into art. And that's just the beginning. Wait until you hear how Vulcan's volcanic fury was more than just myth, but that's a story for the next segment. Now let's journey from the fiery workshops of Greece to the molten heart of Roman mythology, where Vulcan's forge wasn't just a metaphor, it was a roaring, earth-shaking reality. Unlike Hephaestus, who crafted his wonders in a golden palace, Vulcan's domain was the volcano itself, a place where fire and creation merged in the most dramatic way imaginable. When ancient Romans witnessed the terrifying power of eruptions, rivers of lava, plumes of ash darkening the sky, the ground trembling beneath their feet, they didn't see chaos alone. They saw divine craftsmanship. To them, these explosions weren't random acts of nature but the visible labor of Vulcan at his anvil. Every spark, every burst of flame was the god hammering out celestial weapons or armor for the gods. The island of Vulcano off the coast of Sicily became synonymous with his name, its smoking vents believed to be the very chimneys of his underground forge. But this wasn't just Roman imagination at work. Across the world, eruptions inspired similar myths. Take Pele, the Hawaiian goddess of fire, whose forges were said to be the bubbling lava pits of Kilauea. Like Vulcan, she didn't just destroy, she shaped. The land itself was her creation, new earth rising from her molten artistry. Or consider the Japanese Kagetsuchi, the fire god whose birth scorched his mother Izanami so terribly that his father, Izanagi, cut him into pieces, each fragment becoming a new volcano. These stories reveal a universal truth. Ancient cultures didn't fear volcanoes blindly. They revered them as the workshops of gods. Vulcan's connection to fire went deeper than spectacle. His forge was a symbol of transformation where raw elements became objects of power. When Jupiter needed thunderbolts, it was Vulcan who forged them. When heroes demanded unbreakable armor, his fires delivered. Even Mars, the god of war, relied on Vulcan's weapons to fuel his battles. But here's the twist: Vulcan's creativity wasn't limited to war. He crafted Juno's golden throne, Venus's jewelry, even the first ever automated bellows to keep his fires burning. His volcanoes weren't just destructive, they were the birthplace of innovation. What makes this myth so fascinating isn't just its scale, but its grounding in real-world awe. Without scientific explanations for eruptions, our ancestors did what humans do best: they wove stories. And in doing so, they turned terror into reverence, chaos into craft. So the next time you see footage of a volcano lighting up the night sky, remember, you're not just watching geology in action. You're glimpsing the ancient echo of a god at work. And speaking of celestial workshops, wait until you hear how the Norse smith Wayland and turned imprisonment into legend. But that's a tale for another forge. Now let's shift our gaze from the fiery depths of Vulcan's volcanoes to the chilling halls of Norse legend, where captivity became the crucible for one of mythology's most cunning smiths. The myth of Wayland and the smith shatters the illusion that imprisonment strips a divine craftsman of his power. In fact, his darkest moment became his greatest triumph. King Nithad of Sweden thought he had rendered Wayland powerless when he severed the smith's hamstrings and trapped him on a remote island, forcing him to forge treasures for the royal court. But here's where the myth gets twisted. Wayland didn't crumble. His workshop wasn't just a prison. It became a lab of vengeance. With every hammer strike, he turned his suffering into strategy. First, he crafted golden goblets from the skulls of Nithad's sons, serving their father wine from them in grim silence. Then he lured the king's daughter, Bodvild, into his forge, leaving her with more than just a repaired ring. But his masterstroke, wings, using feathers scavenged from birds, Wayland didn't just escape, he soared. This wasn't a desperate flight, it was a statement. Every flap of those wings mocked the king's belief that chains could break a divine smith's spirit. The Norse didn't tell this story to warn of Wayland's cruelty. They told it to celebrate ingenuity under oppression. His legend echoes in artifacts like the Frank's casket, an Anglo-Saxon chest carved with his tail, proving how deeply this myth resonated. What's fascinating is how Wayland's story mirrors real-world smithing taboos. Ancient Norse cultures believed a smith's tools held power even when separated from their master, a superstition born from stories like this. And while Hephaestus had golden automatons, Wayland had something darker, a workshop where every creation carried hidden purpose. His myth reminds us that divine smiths weren't just artisans. They were strategists, turning even their weakest moments into opportunities to reshape fate. But don't assume all smith gods worked alone. Up next, we'll see how collaboration between divine craftsmen birthed legends even greater than their individual talents, a truth that flips another myth on its head. Now let's step into the bustling workshops of mythology, where the clang of hammers often echoed in harmony. The idea that divine smiths were solitary figures is a myth as fragile as untreated iron. In truth, some of mythology's most breathtaking creations sprang from collaboration, proof that even gods understood the power of teamwork. Take the Celtic trio Goibniu, Credni, and Leuchter. These weren't just colleagues, they were a supernatural assembly line. Goibniu forged the weapons with unbreakable precision. Credni adorned them with enchanted bronze and gold, while Leuchter crafted handles and shafts so flawless they never splintered. Together, they armed the Tuatha De Danann for battles where a single flaw meant defeat. Their teamwork wasn't just efficient, it was magical. Spears made in their shared workshop could return to their owner's hands like boomerangs, a feature no solitary smith could have perfected alone. Then there's the Hindu Ribhus brothers Ribhu, Vajra, and Vibhavan, whose collaboration blurred the line between craft and alchemy. When the gods challenged them to reshape a single sacrificial cup into 4 identical ones, they didn't just meet the demand. They reinvented creation itself. Using a blend of sacred chants and metallurgy, their shared effort turned impossibility into legend. Their story hides a deeper truth. In Vedic traditions, their unity symbolized the harmony needed to sustain the cosmos, proving that even divine smiths relied on synergy. Even Hephaestus, often pictured toiling alone, had help. The Cyclopes, often dismissed as mere assistants, were co-creators of Zeus's thunderbolts and Poseidon's trident. Without their combined skills, Olympus might have fallen to the Titans. And let's not forget the Hawaiian gods Kane and Kanaloa, who jointly shaped the first fishing hooks from human bone, blending Kane's knowledge of sacred forms with Kanaloa's mastery of ocean currents. These myths reveal a pattern. Collaborative smiths didn't just make objects, they fused ideologies. The Celtic trio balanced war and artistry. The Ribhus brothers merged ritual with innovation. When smith gods worked together, their creations carried layers of meaning no single mind could engineer. Far from the lone genius stereotype, these stories celebrate collective brilliance, a lesson that resonates from ancient forges to modern workshops. But don't assume these divine craftsmen were all male. Our next myth shatters that illusion with goddesses who wielded hammers with unmatched fury. Now let's shatter another myth with the force of a divine hammer, the idea that smith gods were exclusively male. Across cultures, goddesses wielded fire and metal with just as much mastery as their male counterparts, crafting not just objects but entire forces of nature. Take Oya, the West African storm goddess of the Yoruba people. She didn't just command winds, she forged them with her uruka, a whip made of lightning. She shaped tempests that could level forests or nourish crops. Her forge wasn't an anvil but the chaotic heart of thunderstorms, where she hammered clouds into existence. Oya's power blurred the line between creation and destruction, proving that smithing wasn't confined to physical metal. When she rode into battle alongside the warrior god Shango, her storms became weapons, her breath the bellows that fueled chaos. Then there's Japan's Amaterasu, the sun goddess who didn't just illuminate the world, she crafted one of its most sacred objects. When her brother Susanu's tantrums drove her into a cave, plunging the world into darkness, the other gods devised a plan. They lured her out with a mirror forged from celestial ore, its surface polished to perfection. But this wasn't just a reflective tool. It became the Yota no Kagami, one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan, symbolizing wisdom and divine truth. The mirror's creation story reveals a deeper layer. Amaterasu's light wasn't merely captured in the metal. It was fused into it, turning the object into a vessel of her essence, a masterpiece only a goddess could conceive. Even in Norse mythology, where burly male smiths dominate tales, we find hints of feminine craft. The Valkyries, often depicted as shield maidens, were said to weave fate itself on looms strung with human tendons. Their spears and armor carried enchantments rivaling anything forged by dwarves. And let's not forget the Finnish Lauhai, a shape-shifting sorceress who crafted the Sampo, a magical mill that generated endless grain, salt, and gold. Though often labeled a witch, her smithing prowess was divine. blending spellwork with metallurgy to create an artifact so powerful wars were waged over it. These goddesses redefine what it means to be a divine smith. Oya's storms were living metal, shaped without anvil or hammer. Amaterasu's mirror held the weight of a nation's soul. Lauhai's Sampo wasn't just a tool but a cosmological engine. Their stories challenge the stereotype that strength and craftsmanship belong solely to male deities, revealing instead that creativity transcends gender. But don't assume their creations were always benevolent. Our next myth plunges into the darker side of divine craft, where blessings could twist into curses with a single flawed strike. Now we turn to a myth that carries its own kind of weight, the belief that divine smiths only crafted objects of pure benefit. Nothing could be further from the truth. While their forges birthed wonders, they also unleashed horrors, proving that even the gods' creations carried dual edges. Consider Thor's Mjolnir, the hammer that symbolized protection and order. Forged by dwarven smiths, it could level mountains and summon thunderstorms, yet its power was always tethered to justice. When Thor swung it, he defended Asgard and Midgard alike. But contrast this with the Norse sword Tyrfing, a weapon so cursed it made its wielders infamous. Crafted by the dwarven smiths Wayland and Durin under duress, it was sharp enough to cut through stone and never missed its mark. Yet its curse was inescapable. Every time it was drawn, it had to kill friend or foe. It doomed its owners to cycles of betrayal and violence, from the hero Sigurd to the tragic King Angantyr. Tyrfing wasn't just a blade, it was a malevolent force that twisted fate itself. The Hindu tradition offers another stark example, the Brahmastra, an apocalyptic weapon forged by the divine architect Vishvakarma. When invoked, it could annihilate entire armies, but its recoil was catastrophic. The epic Mahabharata shows how even righteous warriors like Arjuna hesitated to use it, knowing its destruction couldn't be controlled. Unlike Thor's hammer, which restored balance, the Brahmastra was a last resort that left lands barren for generations. Then there's the Greek Pandora, technically Hephaestus's creation but blessed or cursed by other gods. Designed as a punishment for humanity, her jar unleashed plagues and sorrows with only hope trapped inside. Hephaestus might have shaped her form, but the contents were a collective divine cruelty. Even the Japanese sword Kusanagi no Tsurugi, one of their imperial regalia, carried a dark legacy. Pulled from a dragon's tail, it brought victory but also calamity, with legends claiming it summoned storms to sink ships that carried it. What these stories reveal is a recurring theme. The divine smith's power wasn't inherently good or evil. It reflected the intentions behind it. A hammer could defend, but a sword could betray. A mirror might enlighten, but a jar could condemn. These objects became extensions of their maker's complexities, embodying both their genius and their flaws. And speaking of flaws, our next myth tackles another misconception, that these deities worked in humble, ordinary workshops. Wait until you see the celestial palaces and floating forges they actually called home. Now let's shatter another misconception, that divine smiths toiled in modest, ordinary workshops. The truth, their forges were as extraordinary as their creations, blending magic, luxury, and sheer scale in ways that would dwarf any mortal blacksmith's dreams. Take Hephaestus, the Greek god of craftsmanship. His workshop wasn't some sooty cave but a gleaming bronze palace on Mount Olympus, adorned with self-moving anvils and golden automatons that assisted him. These mechanical maidens, crafted by his own hands, could speak, reason, and even empathize, far from the clunky robots you might imagine. Picture walls that shimmered with molten metal reflections and floors that rang like bells with every step. This wasn't just a workplace, it was a testament to his ingenuity, where the boundaries between art and machinery blurred. Then there's Vishvakarma, the Hindu master architect whose celestial workshop floated among the stars. Ancient texts describe it as a realm where time itself bent to his will. towers spiraled into constellations, and anvils were suspended in mid-air by divine energy. Here he forged the weapons of the gods like Indra's thunderbolt Vajra, which could split mountains but also built entire cities, including Lanka, the golden fortress of the demon king Ravana. His workshop wasn't confined to a single location. It was a movable marvel appearing wherever creation demanded it. Venture north to Norse mythology, and you'll find the dwarven forges of Svartalfheim hidden deep within echoing caverns. These weren't dark, cramped spaces, but vast underground cathedrals lit by glowing gemstones. The dwarves Brokka and Sindri worked here, crafting treasures like Odin's ring Draupnir, which multiplied itself every 9th night, and Freya's ship Skidbladnir, large enough to carry all the gods yet foldable to fit in a pocket. The forges resonated with harmonies that shaped the metal's destiny, proving even underground realms could rival the heaven's splendor. Even the Finnish smith Ilmarinen, hero of the Kalevala, had a workshop that defied logic. His furnace stood atop the celestial pillar where the northern lights danced to the rhythm of his hammer. The tools here sang as they worked, and the anvil was said to be forged from a fragment of the primordial sky. When he crafted the Sampo, a mystical artifact that brought endless prosperity, the very stars trembled at its creation. These stories reveal a pattern. Divine forges were extensions of their makers' identities. Whether floating among stars, gleaming on mountaintops, or humming beneath the earth, they reflected the smiths' boundless creativity and their status as more than mere laborers. They were artists, architects, and alchemists, turning raw elements into legacies. And speaking of legacies, our next myth dives into the surprising diversity of what these smiths actually made. Weapons were just the beginning. Now let's tackle one of the most persistent myths about divine smiths, the idea that their craft began and ended with weapons. While swords, hammers, and spears often steal the spotlight, these master artisans shaped far more than tools of war. Their creativity spilled into every corner of mythic life, from music to love, even to the creation of life itself. Take Hermes, the Greek trickster god, who wasn't just a messenger but also a gifted craftsman. As a baby, he famously fashioned the first lyre from a tortoise shell and sheep gut. This wasn't just a whimsical toy, it became Apollo's most treasured instrument, capable of weaving spells through its melodies. The lyre's music soothed gods and mortals alike, proving that divine smithing could birth beauty as easily as destruction. Then there's Vulcan, the Roman god of the forge, whose ingenuity extended beyond thunderous weapons. When he discovered his wife Venus's affair with Mars, he didn't reach for a hammer. Instead, he crafted an invisible, unbreakable net so fine it was lighter than cobwebs. He suspended it over their bed, trapping the lovers mid-embrace to expose their infidelity to the entire pantheon. This wasn't just revenge, it was a masterpiece of engineering, blending artistry with cunning. But perhaps the most profound creations came from Prometheus, the Titan who molded the first humans from clay. Unlike weapons or traps, his work breathed life into the inanimate. He didn't just shape limbs, he stole fire from the gods to animate his creations, gifting humanity with knowledge and civilization itself. In this act, the divine smith became a cultural hero, his craft transcending objects to shape destiny. Even beyond these famous examples, lesser-known myths reveal smiths as inventors of everyday marvels. The Hindu Ribhas brothers, for instance, crafted a self-replenishing cup for the gods and a chariot that could glide on land, water, or air. Whale, and the smith from Norse legend, didn't just forge swords, he carved intricate jewelry that told entire sages in metalwork. And in West African lore, the Yoruba god Ogun didn't limit himself to weapons. He shaped the first tools for farming and building, laying the foundation for human progress. These stories shatter the narrow view of divine smiths as mere armorers. They were polymaths, their anvils birthing everything from love's snares to civilization's foundations. Their legacy isn't just in steel and fire, but in the very fabric of mythic life, proof that creation in all its forms was their true domain. And speaking of domains, our next myth takes us beyond the earthly plane entirely. Because as it turns out, these smiths didn't always keep their feet on solid ground. But let's lift our gaze from earthly forges and look higher, because the myth that divine smiths were bound to the ground couldn't be further from the truth. These craftsmen didn't just work with fire and anvil, they harnessed the cosmos itself, turning stars into tools and the sky into their workshop. Take Ilmarinen, the Finnish smith of legend, whose forge wasn't tucked away in some mountain cave but hung among the heavens. In the epic Kalevala, he hammered out the Sampo, a magical artifact that brought endless prosperity, on a celestial anvil lit by the northern lights. This wasn't just a mythic microwave churning out gold, it was a cosmological engine, its mechanisms woven into the fabric of the sky, and Ilmarinen didn't stop there. He even crafted the vault of heaven itself, bending the dome of the sky like a blacksmith shaping hot iron, proving his mastery stretched beyond mere objects to the architecture of the universe. Then there's the Aztec Zucotl, the celestial serpent of fire, who wasn't just a weapon but a divine smith in its own right. According to myth, it carved the stars into being with its flaming body, its movements across the night sky leaving trails of sparks that hardened into constellations. The Aztecs saw meteors as Zucotl's discarded hammer strikes, celestial shards falling to earth. This wasn't poetry, it was a literal belief that the cosmos was a forge, with gods shaping destiny in bursts of stellar fire. Even the Norse dwarves, often pictured toiling underground, had celestial ties. Their greatest creation, the ship Skidbladnir, could fold small enough to fit in a pocket yet unfold to sail across the sky, its sails catching solar winds. And let's not forget the Hindu Vishvakarma, architect of the gods, who built palaces that floated among the clouds, workshops where the boundaries between earth and heaven blurred. These myths reveal a stunning truth. Divine smiths didn't just work with the elements, they worked among them, their forges suspended between myth and astronomy. Their craft wasn't limited by geography, it was as boundless as the imagination, turning the sky into a canvas and stars into tools. And if you thought their workshops were impressive, wait until we explore the tools they used, because these weren't your average hammers and tongs. Now let's shatter another myth that divine smiths were infallible artisans whose works never faltered. The truth is, even these legendary craftsmen faced spectacular failures, proving that divine skill didn't guarantee perfection. Take Amatsumara, the Japanese smith god tasked with forging a sacred sword to pacify the storm deity Susanoo. According to the Kojiki, his first attempt shattered mid-strike, the blade splitting like brittle ice. This wasn't just a minor flaw, it was a cosmic embarrassment, forcing the gods to summon a second smith, Ameno-Habari, to complete the task. The broken sword, named Aim no Habari, became a relic of humility, reminding even deities that mastery requires trial and error. Then there's the Greek Tolos, Hephaestus's bronze automaton designed to protect Crete. While initially imposing a molten metal giant who hurled boulders at invaders, his design had fatal flaws. The Argonautica reveals how the sorceress Medea exploited his single vein of ichor, draining his life force like a ruptured pipe. This wasn't just a technical glitch, it was a miscalculation of immortality, turning what should have been an unstoppable guardian into a toppling statue. Even the Celtic Goibniu, famed for his unbreakable weapons, faced setbacks. In one lesser-known Irish myth, his invincible spear refused to harm the hero Cu Chulainn during a trial, its magic recoiling as if ashamed. The lesson, divine craftsmanship could be as unpredictable as the mortals wielding it. These failures weren't weaknesses, they were proof of ambition. The Norse dwarves' mead of poetry, initially brewed from the blood of a wise being, first emerged as a toxic sludge before they refined it. Similarly, the Hindu Ribhus brothers botched their early attempts at reviving a sacrificed cow, stitching its hide awkwardly until the gods corrected them. What's fascinating is how these myths reframe failure. Unlike mortal smiths whose mistakes might end careers, divine failures became teaching moments, sometimes literally. The Japanese amenenu-hoko, a celestial spear that crumbled during the creation of the islands, was reforged into a symbol of perseverance. So the next time a project goes awry, remember, even gods drop the hammer sometimes. Their stories show us that true mastery isn't about never failing. It's about forging meaning from the cracks. And speaking of cracks, wait until we explore how some cultures believed divine smiths shaped not just objects but entire civilizations. Now let's tackle another fascinating myth, the idea that divine smiths were universally revered across all cultures with equal prestige. The reality is far more nuanced, revealing a spectrum of reverence that ranged from Olympian grandeur to shadowy marginalization. Take Hephaestus, the Greek smith god, who held a throne on Olympus despite his physical differences. His forge was said to be a marvel of bronze and gold, and his creations, from Pandora to Achilles' armor, were central to divine affairs. Yet contrast this with the Cyclopes, who also crafted Zeus's thunderbolts but were often depicted as brutish outcasts, relegated to dark forges beneath volcanoes. Their immense skill didn't grant them social standing, proving that divine talent didn't always equal divine respect. Then there's Ogun, the Yoruba Orisha of metal and war, whose worship reveals even more complexity. In West Africa, he's both feared and venerated, a patron of blacksmiths, but also associated with destruction and the chaotic energy of creation. Unlike Hephaestus, Ogun's myths often blur the line between reverence and caution. His followers might offer him palm wine and iron tools, yet they also whisper warnings about his fiery temper. This duality shows how cultural context shapes divinity. Ogun isn't neatly enshrined like Greek gods, but exists in a dynamic tension between creator and destroyer. Even within a single pantheon, status could vary wildly. The Hindu Vishvakarma, architect of the gods, enjoyed Brahmin-level prestige, his name invoked during construction and craftsmanship rituals. Yet the Ribhus brothers, though divine artisans, were initially mortal, a detail that subtly underscored their lesser rank despite their celestial promotions. Meanwhile, in Norse myths, the dwarf smiths like Broca and Eitri crafted treasures for the gods but were rarely worshipped themselves, treated more as contractors than deities. This inequality extended to how these figures were mythologized. The Finnish Ilmarinen, central to the Kalevala, was celebrated in epic poetry, while the Slavic Svarog's worship faded into obscurity, surviving only in fragments. And let's not forget the Japanese Amitsumara, whose failed sword attempt we discussed earlier. His myths are sparse, overshadowed by more prominent kami. What's striking is how these disparities mirror human societies. Divine smiths, like mortal artisans, were often judged by their utility. Cultures that prized metalwork, like the Celts with Goibniu or the Romans with Vulcan, elevated their smiths. Others, where crafting was seen as a lower-class trade, kept their smith gods at arm's length. So the next time someone claims all divine smiths were equally honored, remember, divinity, like metal, takes many forms under the hammer of culture. And speaking of culture, our next myth reveals how these craftsmen didn't just shape tools, they shaped civilizations themselves. Now let's shatter the illusion that divine smiths relied on everyday tools. These master craftsmen wielded implements as extraordinary as their creations, each brimming with magic and purpose. Take Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, forged by the dwarven smiths Broca and Eitri. This wasn't just a weapon, it could level mountains, summon lightning, and most remarkably return to Thor's hand like a boomerang. The Norse myths describe it as so potent that even the gods feared its power, yet so precise it could gently revive Thor's goats after a feast. Then there's Whale and the smith's legendary grindstone, a seemingly humble tool with a terrifying secret. According to Germanic legends, this wheel never dulled, sharpening blades to supernatural keenness. But its true horror lay in how Whale used it during his captivity, grinding down the bones of his captors' sons to craft grotesque trophies. Here, a simple tool becomes an instrument of vengeance, proving that in divine hands, even the mundane turns mythic. Crossing continents, the Japanese Amenenu-hoko spear defies all expectations. When the primordial gods Izanagi and Izanami stirred the ocean with this celestial tool, its dripping brine didn't just form one island, it birthed the entire Japanese archipelago. Unlike Western hammers and anvils, this spear wasn't confined to a forge. It shaped geography itself, blending creation with territory in a way only divinity could achieve. Even the materials of these tools held divine significance. The Hindu Vishvakarma's golden axe wasn't merely for carving. It balanced cosmic order, used to sculpt sacred chariots that mirrored the universe's structure. Similarly, the Finnish Ilmarinen's hammer Sampo, yes, the same one that clanged eternally, wasn't just noisy. Its rhythmic strikes were said to generate prosperity, weaving magic into every strike. And let's not overlook the self-aware tools. Slavic myths speak of Svarog's tongs, which could move independently to grasp the sun itself, or the Celtic Goibniu's enchanted mallet, which not only forged unbreakable weapons but also imbued them with the power to heal their wielders, a rare duality in mythological arms. These stories reveal a truth: divine smiths' tools were extensions of their will, often carrying as much legend as the artifacts they produced. Whether shaping landscapes, enforcing justice, or bending cosmic rules, these implements were never mere instruments, they were partners in the miraculous. And speaking of miracles, our next myth dives into how these smiths didn't just serve gods, some shaped fate itself. Now let's dispel the myth that divine smiths were mere servants to greater gods. While many crafted weapons for thunder gods or armor for war deities, some wielded power so profound they answered to no one. These independent smiths didn't just forge tools, they shaped destiny. Take the Etruscan Sethlans, a figure often overshadowed by flashier pantheons. This enigmatic smith wasn't busy fulfilling orders from higher deities. Instead, he worked the forge as a cosmic architect, hammering out the very threads of fate. Etruscan art shows him not in some god's workshop, but standing at the anvil of existence itself, tempering metals that symbolized life's unbreakable bonds. His creations weren't requests, they were inevitabilities. Then there's the West African Ogun, a smith so fiercely independent he became patron of outcasts and rebels. While other gods demanded worship, Ogun's power flowed from his anvil, not prayers. Yoruba myths tell how he carved paths through primordial forests with his machete, not for divine command, but because creation demanded it. Even today, his followers celebrate him not as a subordinate deity, but as the unstoppable force behind civilization's first tools. The Finnish Ilmarinen offers another stunning example. This eternal smith didn't wait for gods to commission his masterpiece, the Sampo. He forged this mythical mill to generate endless abundance purely because the world needed it. When the Sampo was stolen, Ilmarinen didn't petition higher powers, he pursued it himself, proving his autonomy. His legend echoes in Kalevala runes as a being who answered only to his craft's demand. Even in Japan, the Kami Amatsumara defies the servant stereotype. Hidden away in Aiza's sacred forge, this mysterious smith didn't create for other deities' glory. His mirrors and swords held such intrinsic power that emperors believed descended from gods still bowed before them. The Kojiki records how his uncommissioned mirror became the sun goddess Amaterasu's embodiment, showing how divine smiths could define celestial order without taking orders. These masters remind us that true craftsmanship transcends service. Whether shaping fate like Sethlans, pioneering like Ogun, or innovating like Ilmarinen, their authority came from skill, not subjugation. And that leads us to another revelation. Some smith gods didn't just forge metal, they forged emotions, as we'll see next. Now let's shatter the cold, unfeeling image of divine smiths once and for all. These masters of metal weren't just emotionless artisans, they burned with passions as fierce as their furnaces. Their stories reveal hearts as molten as the metals they shaped, capable of love, rage, and everything in between. Take Hephaestus, the Greek smith god who turned rejection into legendary vengeance. When his mother Hera threw him from Olympus for his lameness, he didn't just accept his fate. He crafted a golden throne so cunningly trapped that when Hera sat on it, she couldn't rise. This wasn't just clever engineering, it was raw, personal payback served ice cold from a heart once scorched by betrayal. Only when Dionysus got him drunk and coaxed him back to Olympus did Hephaestus free her, proving even gods couldn't escape the consequences of emotional wounds. Then there's Ogun, the West African warrior smith whose fury could reshape battlefields. Yoruba traditions tell how his wrath during cosmic wars was so terrifying that other gods begged him to stop forging weapons. But Ogun's anger wasn't mindless, it was the white-hot focus of a creator who saw his sacred craft abused. His followers still channel this controlled fury in rituals, where dancers embody Ogun's passionate energy through frenzied, hammer-like movements that mirror his divine temper. But divine smiths weren't all about anger. The Chalybes, ancient Black Sea metalworkers worshipped as demigods, shared a tender bond with their forged spirits. Their myths describe smiths whispering love songs to their furnaces, believing the flames responded to affection by producing superior steel. One legend tells of a Chalybe smith who refused to leave his dying forged spirit, singing to the embers until his own breath faded, a sacrifice that supposedly birthed the first self-sharpening blade. Even in Japan, the usually stoic Amatsumara showed unexpected vulnerability. When his prized sword shattered during a sacred ritual, shrine records describe him weeping into the forge for 9 nights, his tears said to temper the reforged blade with divine sorrow. This emotional display shocked other kami, proving that even the most reserved smith gods harbored deep feelings about their craft. These stories melt away the myth of emotionless artisans. Whether it's Hephaestus' bitter revenge, Ogun's righteous fury, or the Chalybes' forge-bound devotion, divine smiths remind us that true creation flows from passion as much as skill. And speaking of creation, let's examine another misconception, that their craft was purely physical labor. Moving beyond raw metal and fire, the work of divine smiths often wove together the physical and spiritual in ways that defy modern expectations. Their craft wasn't just about hammer and anvil, it was a sacred act that infused objects with supernatural power, binding the mortal and divine realms. Take the legendary Japanese swordsmiths who served as spiritual intermediaries as much as artisans. Before forging a katana, masters like Masamune would undergo weeks of purification, fasting, chanting, and avoiding negative thoughts to ensure their spirit flowed pure into the blade. The actual forging was a ritualized dance with every hammer strike timed to prayers. The folded steel wasn't just about strength, each layer was believed to trap kami spirits within the metal. This explains why swords like the Kusanagi note, tsurugi, were considered living entities, their soul tested by placing them in streams to see if they could alter water currents. Even today, Shinto priests perform misogi purification rites on antique blades, acknowledging their lingering spiritual weight. In Celtic myths, the smith god Goibniu's creations carried Jisa magical vows that bound the wielder's fate. His spears never missed, but only if the user obeyed strict conditions, like never refusing a duel. These enchantments weren't mere spells, they wove destiny itself into the metal. The legendary spear Gibolg, forged for the hero Ku Chulainn, unfurled barbed points inside wounds, a physical manifestation of the Jays requiring its owner to never eat dog meat. Violate the vow and the weapon would literally turn in your grip. Such weapons were less tools than supernatural contracts, their power linked to the user's moral discipline. Even in Hindu tradition, Vishvakarma's architectural creations pulsed with prana life force. Temples he designed, like the cosmic wheel of Konark, were engineered to channel spiritual energy through precise geometric alignments. The iron pillars of Delhi, famously rust-resistant, bear inscriptions describing them as frozen lightning, not metallurgical boasts, but acknowledgments of captured divine essence. These examples reveal a universal truth. Divine smiths operated at the crossroads of craft and cosmos. Their workshops were altars where materials became more than sum of parts, carrying prayers, curses, or divine will. And speaking of workshops, let's demolish another myth that these sacred spaces were humble, practical places. Now let's shatter the misconception that divine smiths hoarded their knowledge, keeping humanity in the dark. Far from being secretive, many of these celestial craftsmen actively mentored mortals, elevating entire civilizations through shared wisdom. Take Prometheus, the Titan who defied Zeus to gift fire to humanity, an act often framed as theft, but in truth, it was education in disguise. Fire wasn't just warmth, it was metallurgy's foundation. Greek poets like Hesiod describe Prometheus teaching humans to forge tools, turning raw ore into plowshares and weapons. His pupils didn't just receive a tool, they inherited the skill to create, transforming survival into culture. This knowledge transfer was so pivotal that Zeus punished Prometheus not for the act itself, but for disrupting the divine order by empowering mortals beyond their station. Half a world away, the Chinese legend of Qiong Kai mirrors this rebellion. This winged tiger deity, often depicted with smithing tools, was said to descend from mountains to teach ancient tribes advanced bronze casting techniques. Historical Shang dynasty vessels even bear inscriptions thanking the metal-bringing beast for teaching alloy ratios that produced ritual cauldrons capable of whistling when correctly tuned, a blend of chemistry and spirituality. Unlike Prometheus, Qiong Kai wasn't punished. Instead, workshops revered him alongside ancestors, proving some cultures celebrated divine human collaboration. Even the Norse myths, full of guarded treasures, have moments of mentorship. The dwarf Regin, though flawed, meticulously trained the hero Sigurd in smithing before they forged Gram, the sword that could split anvils. The epic Volsunga saga emphasizes Sigurd's education, detailing how Regin taught him to read golden runes etched in the forge lessons that later helped Sigurd decipher dragon Fafnir's riddles. Here, metallurgy and literacy intertwined as sacred knowledge passed between realms. This mentorship legacy persists in West African oral traditions, where the Orisha Ogun, patron of both warriors and blacksmiths, instructed the first human smiths via dreams. Sacred groves near Yoruba forges still display iron staffs called osh, representing Ogun's presence during apprenticeships. Unlike Greek myths where gods jealously guarded secrets, Ogun's teachings emphasized communal progress. Any initiated smith could channel his wisdom, provided they respected the craft's spiritual gravity. These stories reveal a pattern. Divine smiths didn't just make objects, they made innovators. Whether through defiance like Prometheus or devotion like Ogun, they recognized that true craftsmanship thrives when shared. And speaking of sharing, our next myth tackles an even bigger surprise. Their workshops were anything but silent. Now let's challenge the image of divine smiths as wizened elders hunched over their anvils. While many mythologies depict these celestial craftsmen with silver beards and stooped shoulders, others reveal surprising exceptions, youthful deities whose vigor matched their craftsmanship. Take the Slavic Svarozhich, a radiant fire god often portrayed as a golden-haired youth. Unlike the stereotypical aged smith, he embodied the untamed energy of a forge's flames. Folk songs describe him dancing between sparks, hammering celestial armor so swiftly his movements blurred like lightning. His youth wasn't a limitation. It symbolized renewal, with each spring festival featuring villagers igniting new fires in his honor to represent cyclical rebirth. Even his name, meaning son of Svarog, hints at generational transition, proving divine smithing wasn't confined to antiquity. Contrast this with the Finnish Ilmarinen, an archetypal elder smith whose epic Kalevala hymns celebrate his centuries of labor. With a beard white as furnace ash, he forged the mythical Sampo mill over 3 lifetimes, his patience as unyielding as steel. Yet age here denoted mastery, not decline. When his rival Joukahainen mocked his slow pace, Ilmarinen retorted by crafting a self-plowing field, proof that his accumulated wisdom could outmatch youthful arrogance. West African traditions offer another twist with Ogun's dual aspects. While often revered as an ancient warrior smith, his Dahomey incarnation, Gu, appears as a virile young hunter who tempers machetes between battles. Vodou art shows him mid-stride, muscles glistening, hammer raised a far cry from the frail elder trope. This duality reflects smithing's nature, both primal force and refined skill. Even Hephaestus, typically depicted as middle-aged, had youthful episodes. A Cretan variation describes him inventing automated tripods as a precocious child, astounding Olympus before his exile. These variations dismantle the monolithic old smith stereotype, revealing deities as dynamic as the metals they shaped. The next myth will shatter another assumption about where these smiths work. Because their forges weren't always where you'd expect. Now let's turn our attention to another fascinating misconception: the idea that divine smiths only worked in blistering hot forges. While fire and molten metal dominate most myths, some cultures envisioned their celestial craftsmen shaping wonders in the most unexpected conditions. Imagine forges crackling not with flames, but with the eerie blue glow of ice and bone. Take the Inuit sea goddess Sedna, who crafted tools from whalebone and frost in the depths of her underwater realm. Far from the roaring furnaces of other smiths, her workshop was a cavern of eternal cold, where she carved harpoons and knives so sharp they could split a single strand of hair. These weren't ordinary tools, they held the power to summon sea creatures or calm storms, their magic woven into every icy groove. Sedna's cold forge symbolized harmony with nature, proving that mastery over materials didn't always require heat. Norse myths, too, held surprises. Legends speak of dwarves forging weapons from rivers of frost, hammering blades in caverns where breath turned to ice. One tale describes the sword Gramma, its edge honed not with fire but by the chilling winds of Niflheim. When the hero Sigurd tested it, the blade shattered a boulder clean in half, its cold-forged steel sharper than any flame-tempered weapon. Even Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, carried traces of this duality, forged in a cosmic furnace yet cooled in the icy waters of the Well of Erd, blending extremes to create something indestructible. Then there's the Japanese aim no Habakiri, the heavenly snake-slaying sword, said to be formed from frozen divine breath. Susanoo, the storm god, plunged it into a glacier to purify its edge, creating a weapon that could cleave through deception as easily as flesh. Unlike the soot-stained workshops of other smiths, this sword's creation was a ritual of stillness where patience replaced pounding hammers. Even in Celtic lore, the smith god Goibniu occasionally worked with enchanted silver mined from glacial veins, crafting cups that never warmed to the touch. These cold-wrought artifacts weren't lesser, they carried a different kind of power, one tied to endurance and preservation. So the next time you picture a divine smith, remember, their workshops might have been nestled in glaciers, ocean depths, or even the void between stars. And speaking of unexpected workplaces, our next myth will reveal how some of these craftsmen literally worked among the clouds. Now let's shatter another stubborn myth that divine smiths were limited to metal alone. While gleaming swords and golden armor dominate our imaginations, these celestial craftsmen shaped far more than just ore. Their genius extended to bone, stone, and even the very fabric of life itself. Consider the legendary Chinese smiths who crafted bows from dragon sinews. These weren't mere hunting tools. The mythic bowmaker Gan Jiong, for instance, wrenched sinews from a slain celestial dragon, twisting them into strings that could launch arrows through mountains. The material pulsed with the dragon's residual power, making each shot unfailingly accurate. Such bows weren't just weapons, they were living extensions of the creatures they came from, their organic nature making them more adaptable than rigid metal. Jewish lore offers an even more striking example, the golem. This clay giant, animated by sacred Hebrew inscriptions, was the ultimate organic creation. Unlike forging a sword, the rabbi smiths of Prague molded raw earth into humanoid forms, then breathed life into them with words rather than fire. The most famous golem, created to protect the Jewish community, moved with a lumbering strength no metal automaton could match. Its body, though earthen, healed cracks on its own, a trait impossible for hammered steel. The golem reminds us that some divine smiths worked not with anvils, but with the primal elements of creation itself. Then there's the Maori greenstone weapons of New Zealand. Known as paunamu, this jade-like stone was tougher than most metals when properly worked. Tribal smiths shaped it into mere clubs and chisels through endless polishing with sand and water, their process echoing the slow wear of rivers. A single greenstone potu could shatter bone without chipping, its molecular structure growing denser with age. These weapons were so revered that they became heirlooms, passed down for generations, something unthinkable for corroding iron blades. Even in Greek myths, we find Prometheus molding humans from clay, while the Egyptian god Khnum sculpted children's souls on his potter's wheel. These acts blur the line between smithing and creation itself. Far from being metal-obsessed, divine smiths understood that true craftsmanship adapted to its materials. Whether sinew, stone, or clay, their genius lay in seeing potential where others saw limitations. And if you think that's surprising, wait until you hear how some of these beings forged their tools without using heat at all. Now we uncover a truth darker than soot, the deep, often chilling ties between divine smiths and the realm of death. Far from being mere artisans, these figures stood as gatekeepers, guides, and even lords of the underworld, their forges echoing with the whispers of the departed. Take Vulcan, the Roman smith god, whose volcanic workshops weren't just fiery creative spaces. Ancient myths reveal they also served as gateways to the underworld. The lava rivers that spilled from his Mount Etna forge were thought to carry souls downward, their glowing channels mirroring the Styx itself. Villagers near active volcanoes would hear his hammer strikes and interpret them as knocks from the dead, a reminder that every sword he crafted carried the weight of mortality. Even his iconic limp, some scholars argue, symbolized a hobbled journey between worlds, his body a bridge linking creation and decay. West Africa's Ogun reveals an even more visceral connection. As both god of iron and war, he didn't just forge weapons, he decided who wielded them in the afterlife. Yoruba traditions hold that fallen warriors passed into Ogun's spectral forge, where their souls were reforged into ancestral guardians. His anvils didn't shape metal alone, but the very fate of the dead. To this day, followers leave rusted blades at his shrines as offerings, tools surrendered back to the deity who'd someday recycle them into spiritual armor. Then there's the eerie role of Celtic smiths as psychopomps, conductors of souls. Irish myths describe Goibniu not just crafting spears, but also fashioning silver lanterns to light the dead's path to the otherworld. His forge's smoke was said to carry prayers to departed heroes, while the rhythmic clang of his hammer kept malevolent spirits at bay. In some tales, his anvil served as a literal crossroads, one strike for the living, two for the dead. Perhaps most haunting is the Japanese Amatsumara, a lesser-known smith deity linked to graveyards. Shinto texts describe him hammering rusted nails from old shrines, then melting them down to create protective talismans, transforming symbols of decay into shields for the living. His craft embodied the cycle of death and rebirth, each recycled scrap holding residual spiritual energy. These myths shatter any notion of divine smiths as detached craftsmen. Their hammers shaped more than metal, they molded the boundary between life and what lies beyond. And as we'll soon see, even their greatest creations sometimes turned against them with terrifying consequences. But here's something that might surprise you. Divine smiths weren't just masters of their craft because of practice or talent. Their power often flowed from something far greater, their divine lineage, sacred knowledge, or even enchanted tools. Take Hephaestus, for instance. While his skills were legendary, his true edge came from his Olympian blood. As the son of Zeus and Hera, his divine heritage granted him more than just strength. It gave him an innate connection to the raw forces of creation. When he forged Zeus' thunderbolts or Poseidon's trident, it wasn't just hammer and anvil at work. His bloodline allowed him to channel the very essence of the gods into his creations. That's why no mortal smith, no matter how skilled, could ever replicate his work. The magic wasn't just in his hands, it was in his veins. Then there's Vishvakarma, the Hindu architect of the gods. His brilliance didn't come from trial and error, but from Brahmin knowledge, sacred wisdom passed down through divine revelation. According to the Vedas, he didn't just build palaces and weapons, he understood the cosmic blueprints of the universe itself. His creations, like the flying city of Lanka or Indra's celestial chariot, weren't just feats of engineering, they were manifestations of spiritual truths. His power wasn't learned, it was bestowed, woven into the fabric of his being by higher forces. And let's not forget the dwarven smiths of Norse mythology. Their legendary craftsmanship, like the unbreakable chain Gleipnir or Thor's hammer Mjolnir, came from more than just skill. They used magic runes, ancient symbols infused with primal power. When they carved these runes into their work, they weren't just decorating metal, they were binding cosmic forces into their creations. A single rune could make a sword unbreakable or armor invincible. Their anvils were altars, and every strike was a prayer. So the next time you hear about a divine smith's masterpiece, remember, it wasn't just about talent. Whether it was godly blood, sacred knowledge, or enchanted symbols, their true power came from forces far beyond the forge. And speaking of power, wait until you hear what happened when their creations turned against them, because sometimes even the gods couldn't control what they made. Now let's shatter another myth, the idea that divine smiths always controlled their creations without consequence. History and legend are filled with terrifying moments when their masterpieces rebelled, turning against their makers or those who wielded them. These weren't just malfunctions, they were warnings about the limits of even divine craft. Take Tolos, the colossal bronze automaton forged by Hephaestus to guard Crete. Gifted to King Minos, this towering giant patrolled the island's shores, hurling boulders at invading ships. But in one famous tale, the Argonauts faced Tolos' wrath when they tried to land. Instead of obeying his purpose, Tolos became a relentless force of destruction, nearly crushing Jason and his crew. Some versions even say the smith's own creation turned against him. Hephaestus' design, meant to protect, became an unstoppable killer. The only way to stop Tolos, a single weak point in his ankle, a flaw that became his undoing. Even the god's craftsmanship wasn't perfect. Then there's the Golem of Prague, a creature shaped from clay by Rabbi Judah Loew in the 16th century. Though not a god, the rabbi's divine knowledge of sacred texts allowed him to animate this being, carving holy words into its forehead to give it life. But the golem didn't stay obedient. Stories say it grew violent, attacking innocents until its creator had to remove the life-giving inscription, reducing it back to lifeless clay. Here, the rebellion wasn't just physical, it was a spiritual failure, a creation exceeding its maker's control. Norse myths take this even further with cursed weapons like Tyrfing, a sword forged by dwarves with a deadly promise it would never miss a stroke, never rust, and would always kill a man when drawn. But the dwarves, angered by their forced labor, cursed it to cause three great evils. True to their words, Tyrfing turned on its owners, driving them to madness and slaughter. Even the mighty hero Svafalome fell to his own blade, proving that no amount of skill could undo a smith's vengeance. These stories aren't just about rebellion, they're about hubris. Whether it's a god's automaton, a rabbi's protector, or a dwarven blade, each tale reminds us that creation carries risk. the smith's power wasn't just in making, it was in knowing when to stop. And as we'll see next, their legacy didn't end with ancient myths. Even today, their influence sparks new stories in the unlikeliest places. Shifting our focus to an even broader impact, let's dismantle the myth that divine smiths were mere artisans without influence on civilization itself. Far from being sidelined craftsmen, these figures were often the hidden architects of cultural revolutions, their forges serving as the birthplaces of societal transformation. Take the Greek transition into the Bronze Age, a leap credited not just to human ingenuity but to divine intervention. Hephaestus didn't just craft weapons, he gifted mortals with metallurgical knowledge, enabling tools that transformed agriculture, warfare, and trade. The myth of Prometheus stealing fire is often seen as symbolic of this very shift. Fire wasn't just warmth, it was the catalyst for smelting, forging, and advancing entire civilizations. Across the Mediterranean, the Cyclopes, often dismissed as one-eyed monsters, were revered in some traditions as primordial smiths whose mastery of metal birthed the first fortified cities. Their association with volcanic regions like Mount Etna hints at how ancient people linked geological power to technological progress. Even Plato's Atlantis myth describes advanced metalworking as a marker of the lost civilization's dominance, showing how deeply smithing was tied to cultural prestige. Now, journey to West Africa, where the Orisha Ogun embodies this principle most vividly. More than a god of anvils, Ogun governed roads, iron, and by extension, urbanization. Yoruba myths tell how his cleaving of primordial forests with iron tools allowed the first cities to rise. This wasn't just symbolism, ironworking in West Africa enabled stronger farming tools, weapons, and trade networks, fueling empires like Benin and Oyo. Even today, Ogun is invoked by blacksmiths, surgeons, and engineers, a testament to his enduring role as a patron of progress, but the connection goes deeper. In Hindu lore, Vishvakarma, the divine architect, didn't just build palaces, he designed entire cities with celestial precision. His legendary creations, like Lanka for the demon king Ravana, show how smiths were seen as urban planners, their work shaping not just objects but societies. Similarly, the Maori god Tain, though primarily a forest deity, is credited with forging the first adzes to carve canoes, enabling migration and cultural exchange across Polynesia. These stories reveal a truth often overlooked. Divine smiths were civilization's silent partners. Their forges didn't just produce swords, they sparked the technologies that built cities, connected continents, and redefined human potential. As we'll see next, their legacy isn't confined to ancient history. Even now, their myths resonate in ways that might surprise you. Now let's shatter the myth that divine forges were peaceful, meditative spaces. Far from silent workshops, these mythical workplaces thundered with a cacophony so intense it shaped the world itself. Picture the Cyclopes hammering away in their volcanic caves. Greek poets like Hesiod described their blows as so powerful they triggered earthquakes, their anvils ringing like tectonic plates colliding. This wasn't just poetic exaggeration. Ancient people heard the rumble of real-world volcanoes and attributed it to gods forging weapons beneath the earth, blending geology with divine craft. Turn north to Finland's Kalevala epic, and you'll find the Sampo, a magical artifact forged by the smith god Ilmarinen. Its creation wasn't a quiet affair. The poem vividly describes the relentless clanging of hammers, the roar of bellows, and the Sampo's own eerie hum, a noise so constant it became synonymous with cosmic order. When the Sampo was eventually stolen, its absence didn't just mean lost wealth but literal silence, as if the world's background rhythm had vanished. Even in Japanese mythology, the deafening roar of Amenanuhoko's creation, the spear that stirred the first islands from the sea, was said to echo across the void. Shinto texts describe the clatter of divine tools as a fundamental part of creation, not just a side effect. These myths remind us that noise wasn't pollution to ancient cultures. It was the sound of transformation, the audible proof of divine labor. And let's not forget the Hindu Vishvakarma, whose celestial workshop was said to produce a symphony of construction hammers on gold, chisels on stone, the hiss of quenching metals, all harmonizing like a cosmic orchestra. Temples dedicated to him often featured ritual drumming to mimic his forge's din, blurring the line between worship and reenactment. So next time you imagine a divine smith, don't picture a lone figure quietly tapping at an anvil. See the shaking earth, the roaring fires, the chorus of clashing metals, because in myth, noise wasn't just sound. It was power in its purest, most tangible form. Now, let's tackle one of the most pervasive myths of all, that the age of divine smiths is over, buried beneath the buzz of modern technology. Nothing could be further from the truth. These ancient figures haven't faded into obscurity. Instead, they've evolved, weaving themselves into the very fabric of our technological age in ways that might surprise you. Take Vulcan, the Roman god of fire and forge. His name now graces one of the most ambitious space missions in history, NASA's Vulcan rocket designed to carry payloads beyond Earth's orbit. It's a fitting tribute, isn't it? The deity once linked to volcanic fury now propels humanity into the stars, his mythological essence reborn in cutting-edge engineering. And it's not just in name. The fiery propulsion of rockets mirrors the elemental power Vulcan once commanded, proving that some archetypes never truly disappear, they simply adapt. Then there's Ogun, the West African Orisha of iron and war. Far from being confined to ancient tales, Ogun thrives in Afro-Caribbean religions like Santeria and Candomblé, where he's revered as the patron of modern tools, everything from scalpels to smartphones. In cities like Havana or Salvador, you'll find altars adorned with both traditional iron tools and sleek gadgets, a testament to Ogun's enduring relevance. Even urban legends speak of mechanics and engineers who invoke Ogun before tackling complex repairs, blurring the line between sacred craft and modern innovation. But perhaps the most unexpected revival belongs to Hephaestus, the Greek smith god. In an age obsessed with artificial intelligence, his myth has taken on new life. Think about it, Hephaestus was the original creator of autonomous beings, from golden maidens to the bronze giant Tolos. Today, scholars and tech visionaries alike draw parallels between his creations and our pursuit of AI. The ethical debates surrounding artificial life, they echo the ancient unease over Hephaestus's automata, reminding us that humanity has always wrestled with the consequences of playing creator. Even in pop culture, these connections are undeniable. The dystopian forgers of sci-fi franchises, the artisan hackers of cyberpunk narratives, they all carry whispers of divine smiths. Marvel's Tony Stark, with his genius for invention and flair for dramatics, is practically a modern Hephaestus in a suit of armor. So no, technology hasn't erased these legends. It's given them new forms, new languages, whether it's rockets bearing a god's name, rituals embracing the digital, or AI debates that sound like old myths retold. The divine smiths are still here, hammering away in the collective imagination, proving that some fires never go out. Now, as the embers of our journey begin to cool, let's step back and see what these 25 myths have truly revealed. Divine smiths were never just makers of weapons or tools, they were mirrors held up to humanity itself, reflecting our fears, ambitions, and even our contradictions. Think about it, Hephaestus's lameness teaching us strength through adversity, Ogun's duality as both destroyer and creator, or Wayland's brutal revenge exposing the dark side of ingenuity. These aren't just stories, they're blueprints of how cultures grappled with power, technology, and the divine. And here's the fascinating part. Every myth we've explored, from the collaborative forges of the Celtic gods to the cursed blades of Norse legends, unpacks a deeper truth. Smith gods were never one-dimensional. They embodied the messy, glorious complexity of human innovation. The same hands that crafted Thor's protective hammer also forged Tyrfing, a sword doomed to kill. That tension between creation and destruction, it's as modern as the debates over artificial intelligence or nuclear energy. The divine smiths, it turns out, were always ahead of their time. But we want to hear from you. Which of these myths caught you off guard? Was it the revelation that some smith gods worked in icy forges, or that goddesses like Oya and Amaterasu wielded divine hammers too? Drop your favorite in the comments. We're as curious as Hephaestus tinkering with a new invention. And while you're there, tell us which mythological deep dive we should embark on next. The secrets of trickster gods, the untold sagas of celestial weavers. Your suggestions will shape our next adventure. Before we go, picture this: a forge glowing in the darkness, its flames licking at the shadows. That fire never really dies, just like these legends. Whether it's Vulcan's name on a rocket or a modern blacksmith invoking Ogun before welding steel, the divine smiths are still with us. Their stories remind us that every era has its makers, its magic, and its myths waiting to be told. So stay curious, keep exploring, and remember, the next time you hold a tool or marvel at technology, you might just be touching a thread of something ancient, something eternal. Thanks for joining us in the Forge of Mythology. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a myth. Until next time, keep the fires burning.